Welcome back to character modeling. We're going to get started with the head now for our character. We completed the body in the previous 16 lessons, and we're going to start in on the head now. So I've set up the image planes already, front and side views, and I created a new project folder for this called Geek Model Head. Just set that up under the project window. I created that in new folders, and in my source images, I copied over these two image planes that I have here, pushed them back. You can kind of look at lesson number 2 for the character modeling, and that will show you how to set up image planes if you've forgotten how to do that, or you're just modeling the head for the first time. I also have my custom shelf up here that I've been building in the previous lessons. You can also use the polygon tab. You can use a lot of the different tools off of this shelf right here. So I'm going to come back to my custom one. I'm going to be using a polycube, and we're going to get started by just clicking on that. Maya has created that in the center here. So if you're just creating your first one, make sure that interactive creation is turned off. And you just drop a cube out there in the center. I've hit 5 on the keyboard to go into shaded mode. I also have wireframe on shaded. And down here I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that I have both wireframe on shaded as well as X-ray turned on. And this way we can see through to our image planes and model a little bit more efficiently. So just coming out here, I'm going to go ahead and just turn that grid off. We don't need that. So under show, I'm just going to uncheck grid and click on that cube out there, and we're going to scale it up. Going to use this for a guide here to just kind of roughly place the size of it. So I'm up to about 14 across here, a little over 14. And I'm going to drop in a subdivision across the width. So just dividing it in half, essentially. And I'm going to come over to my front view and select the faces on this side and delete them. So we're just going to model one side of the character's face. It's the character's left side. And we're going to set up an instance for this, and an instance will allow us to see the other side modeling as we just work on the left side of the character. So back in object mode, I'm going to come under Edit, Duplicate Special, and I'll reset the settings here. So instead of copy, we're making an instance. And under Scale, we want -1 in Scale X, and just duplicate that. So we've got 2 halves here now of the cube, and if I were to just grab the original one and pull it up in object mode, it's not going to follow along this way, but once we go into component mode, you'll see it starting to follow along with what you're doing and moving the points around. So any of the components work that way, as well as inserting edge loops. So if I were to just drop an edge loop here down the center, which you can go ahead and do, that's going to kind of be our first loop right there that we put in to start blocking out the character's head. You can see that it sent that around to the other side. Okay, so this is a very useful technique for modeling, doing polygon box modeling for a character head. And it saves you the time of just working on one side, cutting it in half, and mirroring it over to check your progress. Okay, so let's go ahead and insert another one here. I'm going to come into my side view, and I'm going to place it kind of across here where the character's eye is at. Okay. And with just those 2 divisions right there, hit Q on the keyboard and get out of that. And I'm going to grab the vertices and drag a marquee around them and just start pulling these points over and positioning them. So this is the bottom of his neck here. He's got this very sloped chin. So typically your character would have a chin kind of coming out more like this. So his is back here like that. And this is going to be the back part of his neck. He's got a very small neck for the size of his head. And I'm going to keep these just on the inside of his hairline, kind of back where his skull would be ending. And this will be kind of the top part here, the center of the skull. This one's going to be sort of the high point on his forehead. And this one is sort of coming here where the bridge of the nose and the eye comes in here and meets. Okay, so just very broad strokes right now. Let's come to the front. And I think in this case right here, I'm going to go to a 2-panel view. So I've got my perspective camera on one side. I'm going to drag this over here. And under panels, I'm going to set up my front view. Okay, and just make sure I've got both X-ray and wireframe unshaded turned on. And this is a little bit easier way. It's hard to see these points back here, but we need to start rounding the character out. And we'll grab them over here in our perspective view and sort of use our front view as a guide. So this is our forehead. So it needs to come not only in, but get pushed down. You can see it's starting to round off the top of the forehead. Same thing here. We're going to round that off and bring that down. Okay, it's probably down just a little too far. And the back point here of his head, bring that down as well. And that's going to come in a little bit. And I'm going to actually turn these image planes off over here just under show cameras. That'll shut them off. That way they're not getting in the way. And I'm going to pull back the back part of the head. You can see it's starting to round out here. Same thing there, rounding that off. And then we can start pulling in some of these points right here just a little bit. And we'll see this a little bit more in the side view. But we're just starting to round off our edges right here. So this is the front of his forehead, and it's very flat right now, so I'm going to pull it back just a little bit. Okay, so this is the top part of the head. And we can do the same thing here. Start pulling this back. Here as well. We can pull this back and start bringing it in. You can see right here, this is kind of his jawline. And this wide point right here is actually his neck, which comes in quite a bit. And then this is going to be the back part of his head. Okay, so very broad strokes. We can start to round off his neck a little bit by doing this. There we go. So this is actually his neck. Let's go ahead and just delete those two faces here. Okay, and this probably got pulled in just a little too much. We'll come back to our side view in a moment here and take a look. So I'm going to grab this vertex and kind of pull it back as well. Same thing here. Let's just come to our side view here. And actually the neck is quite narrow like that. Probably just needs to be pulled down a little more. About there. Okay, this has come out just a little too far, so I'm going to pull that in. Same thing here. So this will get rounded out as we start inserting some edge loops. I'm just going to kind of pull it up right there for now. Okay, everything else is looking pretty good. We've got a point right here that can come up. So that's sort of the bottom of his neck, kind of up and back here. Same thing with this. Okay, so it sort of rounds off that area right there, as you can see. These look very simple and sort of easy to just kind of step over these and start inserting a bunch of edge loops and jumping ahead to try to block out the character and get the eyes in. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to just get these very basic planes in place here. So the planes being the faces, and blocking out these shapes when you're in a very low resolution state right now, as we are, and then start building up from here. So the principle being, with this type of box modeling, you want to max out your resolution at each level before you start inserting more edge loops. And this is not only true of box modeling, but also true of digital sculpting and packages like ZBrush or Mudbox. You would do the same thing. You would max out your resolution and then subdivide and go up and then sculpt again, move the points around in this case, and then subdivide once you kind of maxed out that level again. So make sure you get these shapes in place before you start inserting more edge loops. And we've maxed it out, so I'm going to go ahead and start inserting. So this is going to come across here for the brow, kind of middle forehead area and brow, back of the head. We're going to drop another one in here. This is kind of the bottom of the nose where this one's coming. And let's go ahead and shape this out before we drop more in on the side. And that way we don't have to come back and move more points around than we need. Okay, so this has created a little bit of an edge flow that's not as desirable as we'd like. We'd like to keep it a little bit straighter. So I'm going to grab the vertices across here, hit R on the keyboard, and just level those out. That's just dragging the Y one down to the center, and that flattens everything out. Do the same thing here, flatten those out. And then we can kind of start fresh and move these around as we need. So this is going to be kind of coming out here to the base of the nose, kind of underneath here, where the nose is going to start. And we can push this back a little bit, just starting to follow a little bit of a jawline. Same thing here. Kind of pull some of these points back a little bit. Here we go. And this could be the back part of the head. And start pulling the brow forward. And we can angle this down just a little bit. His brow kind of slopes down some. Okay, and these points here. And then we need to kind of come back in here into our front view and start rounding that out, because you can see it's not following. It's very flat across here. So let's grab some of these points and start pulling them out. Round the character back out again. Okay, so you can see that working right there. And the head is kind of flat right here. We probably don't need to pull it out too much. I think overall it needs to come out just a little bit right there. Okay. But that's kind of following along now with what we want. And this point could probably come back a little bit. The front part of the face, as you can see, is very flat right now, but I don't want to pull things back too far. If we check our side view again here, it's rounded off a little bit. And if we pull it back too far, we're going to have to kind of come back and compensate for that. Okay, so we've got a little bit of the cheek right here, starting to form where the eye socket's going to be. And let's get a couple edge loops here on the side. So I'm just going to kind of make a little bit of space here. And probably pull this up and over for right now. We're going to insert one right here. So kind of halfway between there, halfway between here. Okay. And I'm not going to straighten these out. I actually want them following the edge flow that I've created. So we'll start working with that. Q on the keyboard to end that, and start moving some of these points around. So kind of round this out a little bit more. We've got a lot of geometry kind of coming in here very quickly around the neck. So because the neck really tapers off quite quickly. Okay. And this is the kind of here at the eye, the corner of the eye. And all of this is kind of falling into place. You can see there's a straight line between the original 2 points and the one that we just inserted, so we need to kind of round that out just a little bit. He's kind of flat right there, but we'll go ahead and add a little bit of curvature. Same thing here, just rounding this out. It's that high point right there on his head. And now that we have that in there, we can actually take this one and kind of pull it down and back. He's got kind of a extreme slope right here. So this will be our high point now. Pull this one back. Okay, and just kind of leveling that one out. There we go. And let's come back to our front view. So again, it's gotten a little flat through here. So let's come over here and kind of pull some of these points out so you can see where it's flattened out from that insert. So I'm just going to round these points out this way. This could probably come back now. Pull this one forward a little. Same thing here. So we're getting the curvature kind of looking down on the top of the head. And then same thing here. This is flattened out. Let's pull some of these points out. And you kind of need to move the head around to sort of get the best angle to view this stuff at. So let's round this out. This is his cheek. So I'm kind of bringing it out here. Okay. And same thing here. All right, so you could probably kind of push this back just a little bit and then start bringing these points in and rounding out his neck a little bit. And again, he's got that really tiny neck that we're going to be dealing with. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to kind of shape this here. Probably have to come back a few times and make some adjustments. Okay, so that's starting to work there. It's starting to round out. Okay. So we've kind of got the side of the head working, and what we need to do now is insert 2 edge loops for the front, and that's going to help us start to shape his eye socket that we need to do. And we'll probably put in 2 more across here to shape out that eye socket. Okay, so let's go ahead and drop in 2 more edge loops, kind of a third of the way over, another third of the way, dividing that up. Okay. And we can start rounding this out from the top of the forehead here. So kind of pulling these forward and probably come out a little bit. There we go. Same thing back here. Pushing those out, rounding it out in the back. Okay, and we can kind of check all of that. This might need to come in a little bit now. Now that we've got a little bit more resolution going around the back side, we can start pulling in a few more of these points here and rounding it out a little more. Okay, so we still got these 2 that need to come out. There we go. So you can see that. It's probably a little out there too far. Okay. Okay, so you can see that working. I think these top 2 can probably come out just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so we can see we got the top part of his forehead, but as we start working down the brow here, we can see that these points need to come out as well. So there's his brow right there. And this can actually kind of come over. We're going to start pre-shaping the nose. You can see that right over here. And it can actually come down a little bit. And we can grab this one right here and bring it down as well. Same thing here. We could probably even bring his brow down. His brows really angle quite a bit, so we can start shaping those a little right now. Okay. And we can pull this out for the eye. There we go. And then down here, this is sort of his cheek area, and kind of pull that out. This too. So this is not his nose, this is just the kind of the base of the nose where his nose is going to kind of extrude out from or get pulled out from. So let's start kind of shaping around here just a little bit more, kind of rounding out his cheeks a little more. Okay. And I think we could stand to actually have one more edge loop in here, kind of running down the sides. So let's pull these over. And we're going to have to make a few little adjustments here. So I'm grabbing all of these and pulling them over. And then you can kind of see the top of the head needs to get rounded out as well. So we'll grab all of those. Kind of make sure it's rounding out here. Pull this one down. So all of these are just sitting up a little too high. So we're just going to pull them down a little bit. Okay. I think some of these points are coming down a little too far. Okay, and then we'll need to pull up these points here in the back again, and we're just kind of shifting things over to make room for one more edge loop in here for the eye socket. Okay, and then down here, and it's going to be pretty tight down here. We may actually have to collapse some of that in the back here, which is fine. It'll be hidden underneath the hair, or we may actually have a triangle back there. Okay, and then rounding that out. Okay, so let's go ahead and insert another edge loop here. Just pulling these over a little more. Okay, so there we go. So we've got enough kind of to work with now with the eye socket. Okay, and we'll just have to shape just a little bit here. Grabbing these vertices, pulling them up. Shouldn't have to do too much here. Already shaped quite a bit back here. There we go. A little bit right there, round that out. Okay. All right, so let's start shaping a little bit of the cheek here, and then we'll get to the eye. And our geometry is flowing in an up and down fashion right now. And eventually we're going to start kind of rerouting the edge flow around the mouth here once we're ready to start inserting the mouth. Okay, we're going to do that for the eyes first. So let's come up here, and we need one more edge loop coming across here, either side of the eye, to shape that. So we'll drop in one right here. And it's going to be his eye socket, so I'm actually kind of looking below the eye lid right there, and probably clear up here. We come to our side view. You can see this a little better. So I'm going to grab a couple of these vertices and pull them out for his brow. Okay, and then kind of following that brow. Kind of see it sort of swooping up there around his eye socket, or the eyelid. And this can come in now. And that's kind of going to come in here where the nose and the cheek kind of meet up. Okay. And we can probably start shaping that from our front view now. Okay, so bringing this down. And this is going to be kind of the center of the eye right here. And his eyes are not a traditional shape. They're not an almond shape. So we're sort of dealing with a tear duct that sits low, and the other side of the eye is clear up here. And then it angles down, kind of squares off and comes across the bottom. So we're almost dealing with a square instead of an almond shape, just kind of skewed on the edges here on the side. So this is not a sort of traditional approach to modeling an eye socket. So this point here, I'm going to kind of pull it down and get it right in place here for the tear duct. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to pull this one over, kind of lining that up in the pupil. And pupils are sitting a little bit low in this drawing. And then I'm going to pull this one over here to the side. Same thing here. I'm going to open these up just a little bit more and start kind of pre-shaping. There's sort of the bridge of the nose, and then I'm starting to run the topology around his eye and rounding that out. Okay, and this can come down quite a bit now. There we go. So you see this sort of creating the curvature around the eye. Okay, and I can pull these open just a little wider. Out just a little bit more. Okay, and I think we can probably grab the eyes. Let's bring this down here just a little more. And I'm just sort of looking at the top here, making sure that the brow isn't getting lost. So I'm going to pull that out. It's very easy to get this kind of flat across here, kind of losing the volume. Okay, same thing here with the cheek. Kind of need to pull that cheek out again. Okay, so this is sort of what we're wanting to see, where we have the cheek out here and the brow out here, and then the eye socket starting to come in at this angle. Okay, so we're going to select the faces here in the eye socket. Just shift select those. Make sure that nothing else is selected. And we're going to extrude that once. Center it in world space around the eye, and then just scale it in. And you can see it starting to kind of fit here. Just going to kind of drag it around here a little bit. And Q on the keyboard to end that, and then I'm going to grab a couple of these vertices right here. These need to kind of get pushed in towards the tear duct area, which is right about here. And again, I'm on the outside of the eye. We still have to extrude out the eyelids, but I'm just sort of pre-shaping. And this is traditionally where the other side of the eye would be. And the way I've drawn it, it's sitting up much higher. So let's go ahead and take this and kind of pull it up here. So it's got that angle to it. And we can do the same thing with these points here, kind of pull them up and over. So we're getting that edge right there. Okay. And this angle's down here, and then the lid sort of kind of comes across straight here. So I'm just sort of following the eye socket itself. Grabbing these here. Okay, so there we go. Getting that angle right there. Again, this is pretty non-traditional eye that we're modeling here. Okay, just straightening that out right there. So this is about where our character should be at this point. So I've got a few little points here that could get kind of rounded out and a little more attention to them. And same thing here, we've kind of lost the edge flow on this. So make sure you kind of go through at this point, at this stage, and make sure your edges are flowing. You have nice curves happening down the side of the face, and you don't have flat areas or little points kind of sticking out like I do here. There's another kind of flat area that I didn't quite get on that last insert. So check everything out before you start on the next lesson. And we'll come back here and start inserting some more edge loops around the eyes. We're also going to build an eyeball so we can kind of form our eye socket around that eye. And we'll do that in the next lesson.